Sukey Richardson and the Defiant Bonnet. Researchers know the satisfaction, glee is a better word for it, of breaking new ground, making the dots connect where they had not been before. For many years, there has been such a cold case in Jefferson County, the case of Sukey in Middleway. Ever since Robert Bates published the account of his multi-volume on the history of Middleway, readers and historians have been vexed for more information about one of the most heart-rending slavery events recorded. It is also the story of one person's artful, determined, and nonviolent defiance against the oppressor. It is the story of Sukey, a servant in a house whose daughter is instructed to go to the well in Middleway only for the purpose of having her taken away and sold south. Ever since, we have asked, who was Sukey, and what became of her or her daughter? The event of selling just part of an enslaved family because of slavery is almost beyond telling in its soul-crushing horror. The following account by Winchester's Cornelia Peake MacDonald in her famous work, A Woman's Civil War, a diary with reminiscences of the war from March 1862, is arguably one of the very few accounts a person needs to read to understand in one's soul and conscience what slavery was. This account, unlike Sukey's, lacks for its coda an act of strong, quiet, and lasting defiance. Cornelia MacDonald, Lethia and her family, in October 1862, Winchester, Virginia. It is at Hawthorne, the home of Angus MacDonald, who was away fighting with Virginia's 7th Cavalry. Lethia is there with her children, Margaret and Hunter, as servants. Her husband is away serving as a teamster for the Federal Army that had been near Winchester earlier the previous March, perhaps unbeknownst at the time to Cornelia MacDonald. Now, Cornelia MacDonald did not own this family, but someone else did, so she had no power to stop a sale even though she knew the family very well. October 12, 1862. The owner of Lethia has been here several times to persuade me to give her up. He wants to sell her to prevent her leaving with the Yankees. She has already been tried and found faithful, for she never offered to leave me when they were here before, and it would be cruel to reward her with such treatment. He does not tell her that there is a Negro trader coming for her, though I am sure she suspects it. I have refused to give her up, but I'm not sure I have the right to do it. I can't endure the thought of her grief. To be torn from her husband and perhaps from her children, her image will be always associated with that of my lovely baby. She held her in her arms when she was first born. She fed and cared for her. And my darling loved her. Her bright face was always brighter when she saw her. It is like giving up the last of her. To me, it seems as if all the flowers of life are withered and nothing left but bare, bitter, thorny stems. October 14th, 1862. More solicitations to give up Lethia. Her tears and grief make me wretched. They say our army cannot remain here for want of supplies. October 15th, 1862. Another painful scene with Lethia's owner. Poor Lethia must go. It is dreadful to see her tears and distress. I went upstairs into a room where she was busy tacking down the carpet. Her tears were falling on her hands as they held the hammer. That I could see, though her head was bent down so that I could not see her face. I could not tell her she had to go, dreading to witness her sorrow. but turned away and wanted for some other time. October 19th. Poor Elle has gone. When she saw there was no hope, she submitted humbly and quietly. She came to my bedside in the early dawn to say goodbye. She wept and wrung her hands. Margaret was with her, but her other child was not to go. She did not wake Hunter, but looked sorrowfully at him. "Poor little fellow," she said. To think of her pitying him in the midst of all her woe. October 20th, 1862. Hunter wanders about the house, calling for Margie. "Where are you, Margie?" And in the early morning when he wakes, he lies and listens for Lethea's footsteps. This morning I heard him. "Did you call me, Eddie? Where are you, Eddie?" I would not have believed that the sorrow of a poor servant and her departure would have made me so sad. Sukey's story is sad, too, but as the philosophers say, the only thing you have control over is your response, and that she had. The original tantalizing account was this: as printed in the 2-volume book, The Story of Smithfield or Middleway, Jefferson County, West Virginia, by Robert L. Bates, originally published in 1958, and this book has been reprinted and is for sale by the Middleway Conservancy. Aunt Sukey was a slave in Smithfield, Middleway, Virginia, now West Virginia. She had a daughter, Daphne. When she was 12 years old, it was decided that there was one too many servants for the family. Freedom could not be accorded to her, as there was no place for her to go if she were freed. To sell her in the community, providing a sale could be made, would only create a domestic problem for her owner. A dealer appeared, and the owner of the girl gave a description of her. Sight unseen, they came to terms. A simple solution of the problem had been found. The master could not tell his family or the other slaves. He kept his counsel to himself. His ruse was to send Daphne to the pump with a small basket on her arm. This would identify her to the agent who would shuffle her along with the other purchases far into the south. The transaction was effected as planned, but Aunt Sukey found a way to mourn this loss of her daughter, and at the time protest against the deal. Aunt Sukey made a slab bonnet, the account goes, the front of which projected far out over her face. For many years she wore the bonnet, particularly when guests visited her master's home, to the great embarrassment of her owner. She maintained that it concealed her face as effectively as did a veil of mourning, and this she could wear at all times, at home and abroad. Finding out who Aunt Sukey was, a researcher's detective story. So let's put this passage under a microscope. First, Googling slab bonnet yields nothing, but slat bonnet does. A bonnet with very large sides that conceal the face of the woman wearing it. It was worn as dress in the area during the Civil War period. The image shown is of a girl in the county in 1864. But what was the full name of a woman who was called just Sukey? I had long given up trying to untangle this knot until recently when I went to wvgeohistory.org, an in-depth online database about the area's history. I typed in Middleway for some reason and hit search. In the list of found topics was the entry, Aunt Sukey. As a photograph dated 1900, taken in the studio of a man named Smith in Martinsburg. My fire was lit and the hunt was on. African American history is hard, especially the matching of a post-Civil War person with a person in pre-Civil War who was enslaved and who is referred to only by their first name in almost all cases in public records. All that was available in official documents were two sets of records of those enslaved in 1850 and then again in 1860. In each case, these census slave schedules, as they were called, only showed the name of the owner and those he enslaved by age and gender. No names at all. We can determine much about white and free African American families in the 1850 and 60 censuses. They give each person's name, age, relation in the family, occupation, and amounts of owned property. Lying down one afternoon, I let my mind do its own work. The idea came that the only thing to do was this: go online to archive.org, locate the 1870 census for Jefferson County, West Virginia, go through the pages until I find names and households in Middleway and the vicinity. Then, searching page by page, name by name, look to see if there is anyone named Sukey who was, number one, African American, listed as a B for black or M for mulatto. Number two, the person would have to be born from about 1840 or later for the age of the child who was sold during slavery to fit into a workable timeline. Sukey would then be aged 30 at the very youngest in the 1870 census. From years and years of document research, I have learned that research must not proceed willy-nilly. It always must have a clear objective. The researcher, from the knowledge of the records they are using and from the nature of the sought fact, must be able to know as quickly as possible whether a certain path of inquiry has any chance of success, to avoid being, quote, lost in wasted time. I knew in searching the 1870 census there was going to be a Sukey or not. If there was no Sukey in the 1870 census around Middleway, the chances of ever finding her would be too long a shot to continue at all. It was the only chance of breakthrough. And behold, there she was, Richardson, Sukey, age 52, F for female, B for black, and keeping house and living in Smithfield, the older name for Middleway, on page 18 of the county census. I tried Ancestry.com, but no luck. But finding her in 1870 census, the one closest to the Civil War, it wasn't absolute proof, but any African-American woman living in Middleway in 1870 named Sukey had a strong possibility of being our friend Sukey. The advantage was her rare name, Sukey. Next, who was the owner? We know the daughter, Daphne, was asked to walk to the town well, which today is still located on Queen Street. The Middleway Conservancy, at its site, have a terrific walking tour map that locates the well. Moreover, we can assume the owner lived in town, a short walk to the well, if they instructed Daphne to walk from the house to the well. The next bar to try to clear was this: was there an owner of Sukey living in Middleway that could be identified from the records? The name of this people owner or trafficker would be given in either or both the 1850 and 1860 slave schedules that accompanied the censuses taken for Jefferson County, Virginia in those years. The schedules listed only the owner's name, and with their name, all those they enslaved, giving only each enslaved person's gender and age and whether they had escaped, as we have mentioned. So, what are we looking for this time in the slave schedules? The idea was to look at all the listings of people owners in the Middleway town and its vicinity in the slave schedules, especially the schedule for 1860, because it was closer in time to the listing for Sukey Richardson in 1870. We look for only one thing that might not be there: an enslaved female person with the same age as Sukey Richardson in 1870 minus 9 or 10 years. Anything else wasn't enough. But we found just such an entry in the 1860 slave schedule. And that tied Sukey Richardson to the household of John F. Smith, a merchant, who owned a house a short walk to the well on Queen Street. Moreover, the Middleway Conservancy map of town identifies that house of John Smith, where presumably Sukey and at one time her beloved daughter Daphne lived and worked. We check on the history and date of the house, using information compiled by the Middleway Conservancy and the exhaustive survey conducted by the Jefferson County Historic Landmarks Commission. We find that the house standing today predates the Civil War and thus is the same one owned by John Smith in the days of Sukey and Daphne's woes. So, the story has come together. What every researcher works for. The dots connected. Susan Sukey Richardson finally gets our respect for the heavy loss she bore by being remembered and appreciated.